British Virgin Islands.
The Virgin Islands, commonly known as the British Virgin Islands, is a British overseas territory located in the Caribbean to the east of Puerto Rico. The islands make up part of the Virgin Islands archipelago. The remaining islands constitute the U.S. Virgin Islands and the Spanish Virgin Islands. The official name of the territory is still simply the Virgin Islands, but the prefix British is often used to distinguish it from the neighbouring American territory which changed its name from the Danish West Indies to Virgin Islands of the United States in 1917. British Virgin Islands government publications continue to begin with the name the Territory of the Virgin Islands, and the territory's passports simply refer to the Virgin Islands, and all laws begin with the words Virgin Islands. Moreover, the territory's Constitutional Commission has expressed the view that every effort should be made to encourage the use of the name Virgin Islands. The British Virgin Islands consist of the main islands of Tortola, Virgin Gorda, Ngada, and Jost van Dyke, along with over 50 other smaller islands and cays. About 15 of the islands are inhabited. The capital, Road Town, is situated on Tortola, the largest island, which is approximately 20 kilometers, 12 miles, long and 5 kilometers, 3 miles, wide. The islands have a population of about 27,800, of whom approximately 23,000 live on Tortola. British Virgin Islanders are classed as British Overseas Territories citizens and since 2002 have had full British citizenship. Although the territory is not part of the European Union and not directly subject to EU law, its citizens are deemed to be citizens of the EU as well.
History.
The Virgin Islands were first settled by the Arawak from South America around 100 BC, though there is some evidence of Amerindian presence on the islands as far back as 1500 BC. The Arawaks inhabited the islands until the 15th century when they were displaced by the more aggressive Caribs, a tribe from the Lesser Antilles Islands, after whom the Caribbean Sea is named. The first European sighting of the Virgin Islands was by Christopher Columbus in 1493 on his second voyage to the Americas. Columbus gave them the fanciful name Santa Ursula y las once mil virgins, Saint Ursula and her 11,000 virgins, shortened to Las Virgins, the Virgins, after the legend of Saint Ursula. The Spanish Empire claimed the islands by discovery in the early 16th century, but never settled them, and subsequent years saw the English, Dutch, French, Spanish, and Danish all jostling for control of the region, which became a notorious haunt for pirates. There is no record of any native Amerindian population in the British Virgin Islands during this period, although the native population on nearby St. Croix was decimated. The Dutch established a permanent settlement on the island of Tortola by 1648. In 1672, the English captured Tortola from the Dutch, and the English annexation of Ngada and Virgin Gorda followed in 1680. Meanwhile, over the period 1672 to 1733, the Danish gained control of the nearby islands of St. Thomas, St. John and St. Croix. The British Islands were considered principally a strategic possession, but were planted when economic conditions were particularly favourable. The British introduced sugar cane, which was to become the main crop and source of foreign trade, and slaves were brought from Africa to work on the sugar cane plantations. The islands prospered economically until the middle of the 19th century, when a combination of the abolition of slavery in the territory, a series of disastrous hurricanes, and the growth in the sugar beet crop in Europe and the United States significantly reduced sugar cane production and led to a period of economic decline. In 1917, the United States purchased St. John, St. Thomas, and St. Croix from Denmark for $25 million, renaming them the United States Virgin Islands. The British Virgin Islands were administered variously as part of the British Leeward Islands or with St. Kitts and Nevis, with an administrator representing the British government on the islands. The island gained separate colony status in 1960 and became autonomous in 1967. Since the 1960s, the islands have diversified away from their traditionally agriculture-based economy towards tourism and financial services, becoming one of the wealthiest areas in the Caribbean.
Geography.
The British Virgin Islands comprise around 60 tropical Caribbean islands, ranging in size from the largest, Tortola 20 kilometers, 12 miles, long and 5 kilometers, 3 miles, wide, to tiny uninhabited islets. They are located in the Virgin Islands archipelago, a few miles east of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The North Atlantic Ocean lies to the north of the islands, and the Caribbean Sea lies to the south. Most of the islands are volcanic in origin and have a hilly, rugged terrain. Madeira is geologically distinct from the rest of the group and is a flat island composed of limestone and coral. In addition to the four main islands of Tortola, Virgin Gorda, Madeira, and Joost van Dyke, other islands include. See also Islands of the British Virgin Islands.
Climate.
The British Virgin Islands enjoy a tropical climate, moderated by trade winds. Temperatures vary little throughout the year. In the capital, Road Town, typical daily maxima are around 32 degc, 89.6 degf, in the summer and 29 degc, 84.2 degf, in the winter. Typical daily minima are around 24 degc, 75.2 degf, in the summer and 21 degc, 69.8 degf, in the winter. Rainfall averages about 1,150 mm, 45.3 in, per year, higher in the hills and lower on the coast. Rainfall can be quite variable, but the wettest months on average are September to November and the driest months on average are February and March. Hurricanes occasionally hit the islands, with the hurricane season running from June to November.
Politics.
Executive authority in British Virgin Islands is vested in the Queen and is exercised on her behalf by the Governor of the British Virgin Islands. The Governor is appointed by the Queen on the advice of the British government. Defence and foreign affairs remain the responsibility of the United Kingdom. A new constitution was adopted in 2007, the Virgin Islands Constitution Order, 2007, and came into force when the Legislative Council was dissolved for the 2007 general election. The head of government under the new constitution is the Premier. Prior to the new constitution, the office was referred to as Chief Minister, who is elected in a general election along with the other members of the ruling government as well as the members of the opposition. A cabinet is nominated by the Premier and appointed by the Governor. The legislature consists of the Queen, represented by the Governor, and a unicameral House of Assembly made up of 13 elected members plus the Speaker and the Attorney General. The current Governor is William Boyd McCleary, since 2010. The current Premier is Orlando Smith, since November 9, 2011.
Subdivisions.
The British Virgin Islands is divided into 9 electoral districts. 8 of the 9 districts are partly or wholly on Tortola, and encompass nearby neighbouring islands. Only the 9th district, Virgin Gorda and Madeira, does not include any part of Tortola. The territory is also technically divided into 5 administrative districts, 1 for each of the 4 largest islands, and then a 5th for all other islands, and into 6 civil registry districts, 3 for Tortola, Joost van Dyke, Virgin Gorda and Madeira, although these have little practical relevance today.
Law and criminal justice.
Crime in the British Virgin Islands is comparatively low by Caribbean standards, and indeed compared to the neighbouring U.S. Virgin Islands. While statistics and hard data are relatively rare, and are not regularly published by governmental sources in the British Virgin Islands, the Premier did announce that in 2013 there has been a 14% decline in recorded crime as against 2012. Homicides are rare, with just 1 incident recorded in 2013. The British and U.S. Virgin Islands sit at the axis of a major drugs transshipment point between Latin America and the continental United States. The American DEA regards the adjacent U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands as a high-intensity drug trafficking area. A cooperation agreement exists between the British Virgin Islands and the U.S. Coast Guard allowing American forces to pursue suspected drug traffickers through the territorial waters of the British Virgin Islands. In August 2011, a joint raid between the American DEA and local British Virgin Islands police arrested a number of British Virgin Islands residents who were accused of being involved in major drugs transshipments, although their extradition to the United States has become bogged down in endless legal wrangling.
Economy.
As an offshore financial centre, the British Virgin Islands enjoys one of the more prosperous economies of the Caribbean region, with a per capita average income of around $42,300, 2010ist. The twin pillars of the economy are tourism and financial services. Politically, tourism is the more important of the two, as it employs a greater number of people within the territory, and a larger proportion of the businesses in the tourist industry are locally owned, as are a number of the highly tourism-dependent sole traders, for example, taxi drivers and street vendors. Economically, however, financial services associated with the territory's status as an offshore financial center are by far the more important. 51.8% of the government's revenue comes directly from license fees for offshore companies, and considerable further sums are raised directly or indirectly from payroll taxes relating to salaries paid within the trust industry sector, which tend to be higher on average than those paid in the tourism sector.
Tourism.
Tourism accounts for approximately 45% of national income. The islands are a popular destination for U.S. citizens. In 2006, a total of 825,603 people visited the islands, of whom 443,987 were cruise ship passengers. Tourists frequent the numerous white sand beaches, visit the baths on Virgin Gorda, snorkel the coral reefs near Ngada, or experience the well-known bars of Joost van Dyke. The BVI are known as one of the world's greatest sailing destinations, and charter sailboats are a very popular way to visit less accessible islands. Every year since 1972, the BVI has hosted the Spring Regatta, which is a 7-day collection of sailing races throughout the islands. A substantial number of the tourists who visit the BVI are cruise ship passengers, although they produce far lower revenue per head than charter boat tourists and hotel-based tourists. They are nonetheless important to the substantial, and politically important, taxi driving community.
Financial services.
Financial services account for over half of the income of the territory. The majority of this revenue is generated by the licensing of offshore companies and related services. The British Virgin Islands is a significant global player in the offshore financial services industry. In 2000, KPMG reported in its survey of offshore jurisdictions for the United Kingdom government that over 41% of the world's offshore companies were formed in the British Virgin Islands. Since 2001, financial services in the British Virgin Islands have been regulated by the Independent Financial Services Commission. As such, the British Virgin Islands is frequently labelled as a tax haven by campaigners and NGOs, and has been expressly named in anti-tax haven legislation in other countries on various occasions. Successive governments in the British Virgin Islands have fought against the tax haven label, and made various commitments to tax exchange and recording beneficial ownership information of companies following the 2013 G8 summit. On September 10, 2013, British Prime Minister David Cameron said, "I do not think it is fair any longer to refer to any of the overseas territories or Crown dependencies as tax havens. They have taken action to make sure that they have fair and open tax systems. It is very important that our focus should now shift to those territories and countries that really are tax havens."
Agriculture and industry.
Agriculture and industry account for only a small proportion of the island's GDP. Agricultural produce includes fruit, vegetables, sugar cane, livestock and poultry, and industries include rum distillation, construction and boat building.
Currency.
The official currency of the British Virgin Islands has been the United States dollar, US dollar since 1959, the currency also used by the United States Virgin Islands.
Workforce.
The British Virgin Islands is heavily dependent on migrant workers, and over 50% of all workers on the islands are of a foreign descent. The national labor force is estimated at 12,770, of whom approximately 59.4% work in the service sector but less than 0.6% are estimated to work in agriculture, the balance in industry.
Transport.
There are 113 kilometers, 70 miles, of roads. The main airport, Terence B. Lettsome International Airport, also known as Beef Island Airport, is located on Beef Island, which lies off the eastern tip of Tortola and is accessible by the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge. Cape Air, LIAT, BVI Airways and Air Sunshine are amongst the airlines offering scheduled service. Virgin Gorda and Gaydar have their own smaller airports. Private air charter services such as Fly BVI and Island Birds Air Charter fly directly to all three islands from any major airport. The main harbour is in Road Town. There are also ferries that operate within the British Virgin Islands and to the neighbouring United States Virgin Islands. As in the UK, cars in the British Virgin Islands drive on the left, however they differ in that nearly all cars are left-hand drive, being imported from the United States. The roads are often quite steep, narrow and winding, and ruts can be a problem when it rains. Cyril E. King Airport in the U.S. Virgin Islands has flights to a wider range of destinations, so is also used for traveling to the British Virgin Islands.
Demographics.
As of August 2013, the results of the 2010 census still had not been published. However, census officials have speculated that the final population count will be around 30,000 people, reflecting strong population growth. At the time of the 2003 census the population was around 21,730. The majority of the population, 83%, are Afro-Caribbean, descended from slaves brought to the islands by the British. Other large ethnic groups include those of British and other European origin. The 2004 census reports 83.4% African, 7% European Caucasian, 9.6% others. Includes Indian, Carib Amerindian, Black Carib mixed, and mixed-race Hispanic. About 4% of the population is of Hispanic origin, irrespective of race, primarily from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. The territory has also been recently relieving immigrants from many islands in Lesser Antilles. The islands are heavily dependent upon migrant labor. In 2004, migrant workers accounted for 50% of the total population. 32% of workers employed in the British Virgin Islands work for the government. Unusually, the territory has one of the highest drowning mortality rates in the world, being higher than other high-risk countries such as China and India. 20% of deaths in the British Virgin Islands during 2012 were recorded as drownings. All of the drownings were those of tourists. Yet despite this, the territory's most popular beach still has no lifeguard presence.
Education.
The British Virgin Islands operate several government schools as well as private schools. There is also a community college, H. Laverty Sturt Community College, that is located on the eastern end of Tortola. This college was named after Honourable Laverty Sturt, Chief Minister. The literacy rate in the British Virgin Islands is high at 98%.
Religion.
The islands are overwhelmingly Christian, 84%, with the largest individual Christian denominations being Methodist, 23%, Anglican, 12%, Church of God, 11% and Catholic, 9%. The constitution of the British Virgin Islands commences with a professed national belief in God. Muslims and Hindus constitute each approximately 1.2% of the population according to World Religion Database 2005.
Culture. Language.
The primary language is English, although there is a local dialect. Spanish is spoken by Puerto Rican and Dominican immigrants.
Music.
The traditional music of the British Virgin Islands is called fungi after the local cornmeal dish with the same name, often made with okra. The special sound of fungi is due to a unique local fusion between African and European music. It functions as a medium of local history and folklore and is therefore a cherished cultural form of expression that is part of the curriculum in BVI schools. The fungi bands, also called scratch bands, use instruments ranging from calabash, washboard, bongos and ukulele, to more traditional Western instruments like keyboard, banjo, guitar, bass, triangle and saxophone. Apart from being a form of festive dance music, fungi often contains humorous social commentaries, as well as BVI oral history.
Sport.
Because of its location and climate, the British Virgin Islands has long been a haven for sailing enthusiasts. Sailing is regarded as one of the foremost sports in all of the BVI. Calm waters and steady breezes provide some of the best sailing conditions in the Caribbean. Many sailing events are held in the waters of this country, the largest of which is a week-long series of races called the Spring Regatta. This is the premier sailing event of the Caribbean, with several races hosted each day. Boats include everything from full-size mono-hull yachts to dinghies. Captains and their crews come from all around the globe to attend these races. The Spring Regatta is part race, part party, part festival. There are races, games, and music during the day, and some partying at night. The Spring Regatta is normally held during the first week of April.